up, everybody? It's JP Finlay. It's the Washington Football Talk podcast, joined by Mitch and Pete, as always, brought to you by Oarsman Automotive of Virginia. As always, our guys, check them out, oarsmanva.com, 7 locations all over Northern Virginia. They're selling everything, Kias, Fords, Dodge, Lincoln, whatever you want. They got it. Toyota. Mitch and Pete, what up, boys? How we doing?
Hello, JP. Welcome back. It looks like you had a spectacular time in Utah, even though you're wearing sort of a beat-up winter jacket. The rest of it looked really good, and I liked your wife's new cowboy hat that she purchased.
Did you get cowboy boots to go with the cowboy hat?
You know, I thought about it, honestly, and I thought it'd be kind of cheating on you guys because we've all had the conversation about next time we go to Dallas, we're going to buy the boots, and then we never do. But I didn't think it was fair for me to buy cowboy boots at the store I was at, and I'd also add that they were wildly expensive. So yes. No, I did not.
I was going to say the boots in Texas would be much more reasonably priced.
Park City, while beautiful, not exactly cheap. I can let you guys know how much that cowboy hat cost offline if you're interested.
Oh, dear.
I am quite interested.
It was.
Are you not going to be able to buy your next pair of J's because of said cowboy hat?
Cowboy hat more expensive than any pair of J's I've ever bought.
Yep, that sounds about right.
So do what you want with that information. But I want to start saying this sincerely. I am going to apologize to the big man, and there was definitely some dude on Twitter that I clowned. The Bieniemy stuff is real. Now, whether or not he ends up here, Mitch brought it up. I said no. I still don't think it's the right move, right hire, any of it. I don't know that it'd be the right move for Bieniemy, but I checked. Rappaport had the tweet over the weekend, I believe. I think I even said last week that I've started to hear this is like there's some truth to this, at least the exploration. So I'm sorry, big man. You brought it up. I said no, and I still don't think it's the right move necessarily, but apparently it's a real option.
The more that it gains a little legs, I kind of think he might be a good move for this organization. And, you know, honestly, anyone coming from the Andy Reid offensive coaching tree, I'd be interested in, just like anyone from the Sean McVay coaching tree, if it ends up being Thomas Brown as well. But I like these guys who are coming from kind of, you know, innovative offensive minds. And that's not to take anything away from a guy like Charles London or, you know, some of the other folks that have come through. But, you know, whatever the knock on Bieniemy is, the reason that he didn't get the head coaching jobs along the way, you know, whatever it may be, he's been sitting between a incredible offensive minded head coach and an unbelievable quarterback. And there's no doubt that he's picked up a lot of good knowledge over the years with him. And I'd be interested to see what he can do outside of the whole Andy Reid thing. And I think for Bieniemy, you know, it's a relatively safe space for him to come here. You know, he has a little bit of a relationship with Ron. They are on the staff together in Philly at the same time. I read somewhere he was Marty Herney was the one that drafted him in San Diego back when Bieniemy was coming out of college as a running back. So, I mean, you know, he's got some familiar faces around here, and it'd be kind of a good space for him to come. Color me intrigued. I think my two favorite right now are Bieniemy and Thomas Brown.
Very classy move of you, JP, to capitulate there. And I don't think I necessarily came out against Mitch when he said Bieniemy originally, but I certainly was skeptical of it. So, Mitch, here's a slight hat tip to you as well. For me, my requirements with this job, as the search has become extended, are pretty simple. Is the person an outside guy, and does he have a track record of success? Like Pat Shurmur's an outside guy, but I don't know how great his track record is. Bieniemy satisfies both checklist points. Now you can wonder how much of the success is really his, how much of it is Reid's, how much of it is just being blessed with Mahomes and Kelsey and Hill. And those are all valid questions, but I'd rather have him come to DC and try and prove the doubters wrong than bring in Shurmur or hire Zampese. I think he is at the top of my list alongside Thomas Brown. And I think this is promising. Now, I don't really think he'll actually come here. And I'm also a little skeptical that this is just Ron floating to Rappaport. Hey, we have no idea what's going on. We're not getting any bites. Can you just put out there that we're interviewing Bieniemy? All the fans love that guy. They're all going to think I'm so smart. And then when he says no, I can at least say we tried. That's sort of my feel right now. But still, let's see if he takes the interview. Let's see if the interview happens, and maybe he becomes a real candidate. And if he somehow ends up taking the job, I'll be pretty pleased.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you guys. I think he's got to be at the top of the list, right? Like, look at where he's been and how good they are. And maybe he's a small part of that. Maybe he's a massive part of that. But, like, guys like Nathaniel Hackett and Adam Gase get head coaching jobs because they're along for the ride with Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning. Like, hell yeah, you'd want Bieniemy as your OC. Who knows what it'll result in, but hell yeah, you'd want him. I don't. To Pete's point about whether he'll take it or whether he'll even take the interview is kind of interesting. Like, I fear shades of, we tried for Matt Stafford, we couldn't get him, so we got Ryan Fitzpatrick. We tried for Russell Wilson, he wouldn't come here, so we got Carson Wentz. Like, hey, we tried for Eric Bieniemy, he wouldn't come here. Here's Pat Shurmur. But I think he should be at the top of the list, right? I mean, just based on the track record of accomplishment, and for all the rumors of, like, he doesn't interview well, like, who cares, dude? Like, I'll probably interview him. I don't care if it goes bad if they win 11 games. You know, like, we'll talk to him at the podium. I don't care if that's bad, if Sam Howell develops. So I don't care about the interviewing stuff. I can't imagine, dumb/criminal stuff that happened 30 years ago is still derailing his career. But maybe that stuff combined with the Commanders is a tough situation. I don't know enough about whatever those allegations are. I don't know. I just, if I'm Bieniemy and the Ravens are an option, and it's now come out that the Ravens are going to tag Lamar, like, the Ravens are so far and away the top option. Like, I mean, by a country mile. And you still got the Titans, and if you want to run the ball, and you got Derrick Henry. My thing is, the reason I say, like, one, I'm not sure it'll happen, but two, I'm not sure it's the right fit. Like, either Ron and Mayhew are full of it and they don't actually want to run all the time, or there's just, again, no plan that you say you want to run it all the time, and then you're going to hire somebody from the Andy Reid tree. And maybe it's different with Bieniemy because he's a former running backs coach, and that was his path. But, like, you can't look at the Chiefs, which is a dynamic offense and has Mahomes, and Andy has always had a good run game, but it's always been pass-first offenses. And they're smart about getting the ball to dynamic running backs in space, which, the analytics folks will argue is the same thing as running the ball. It just, to me, again, shows a lack of a cohesive plan if all of a sudden this dude is the front runner.
I mean, does that surprise you? Like,
no.
We've had 4 years of Ron's, kind of S-shaped path to success that kind of changes on a whim when, in every offseason. It seems kind of right on brand for what this coaching staff has done. And regardless of whether
is that S-shaped like the curve of the letter, or like what the edited version of S?
I was wondering the same thing.
Read into it what you will.
The Rorschach test.
However you want to take that, you can take that.
Yeah.
But the point being that, kind of regardless of what Ron and Marty said at the podium, neither of the two of them are your offensive mind on this coaching staff. And so I want them to bring in a dynamic play caller. And they can talk about wanting to run the ball all they want. At the end of the day, they pretty much let Scott Turner, for the most part of his tenure here, do what he wanted to do and call games the way that he wanted to, even though that seemed like a flawed, plan. And I think whoever comes in next is going to have that leeway, is going to have that runway to call a game how they want to call it. And to me, I like the idea of bringing in somebody who has a little wiggle to him, isn't 3 yards in a cloud of dust on first and second down and hope for a third down conversion pass. I mean, we all know that that's not a sustainable way to win in the NFL these days. You can't win trying to run the ball 2/3 of the time.
Yeah, I hear your trepidation, JP, about the lack of plan, but sort of what Mitch was saying, or maybe he wasn't saying this and I'm saying this, but like, who cares if the plan doesn't match up with getting Eric Bieniemy? Because in the end, you still get Eric Bieniemy, which I think would all be a better hire than we suspected. But yes, if they do want to actually run the ball, then why isn't Greg Roman coming in? Why aren't they doing a second interview with Charles London and Eric Studesville, guys who are either former running backs or come from Atlanta where they ran the ball a ton? So it's a bit disturbing that they might just be saying one thing and then trying to do another. But still, if it concludes with Bieniemy leaving Kansas City, coming here and trying his best to expand his career and make this offense a little more explosive, a little more creative, then that would be the bigger win than Ron once again doubling back on something he said. As long as Ron then lets Bieniemy do what he wants to do, as opposed to cramming handoffs to Brian Robinson and Jonathan Williams down his throat.
All right, 100 chips, and it's just Bieniemy or the field. So you don't have to pick somebody specific. Chances Eric Bieniemy is the Commander's new OC.
I'll go 25 chips, yes. 75, no. JP, I think the most prescient thing that's been said on this podcast in the past 15 minutes was we wanted Matt Stafford and we ended up with. We wanted Russ Wilson, we ended up with. We wanted Eric Bieniemy, we ended up with. I am fearful that that's the real game that's being played here, but just floating that idea out there excites me. I would like to have Bieniemy come, but I'm more fearful that he's a name that's being floated to appease folks.
Yeah, perhaps Andy Reid puts in a really good word for Ron and convinces Eric that this is the best place to go to be under Ron. But I'm at 15 chips. Bieniemy actually comes here. 85, it's somebody else, with the majority of those still on the Zampese section of the chips table.
It's funny. I think I might be higher than both of you guys. What were you?
Well, how could they do that? Could they offer him just a ton of money, or do you think it's the Ron and Andy relationship? Why are you higher than us?
The Ron and Andy relationship thing, I think, it's certainly a factor. But keep in mind, John Harbaugh was on those Eagles staffs too. Like,
yeah,
Andy got relationships with a lot of people, so I almost think we might be overestimating that. But like, I wonder a little bit if this isn't some musical chairs and there's not a lot of seats left for Bieniemy, and Washington is one of them. Like, if the Ravens are keeping Lamar, and forgive me, I've been out of pocket. Like, I don't even know if the Ravens have really been conducting interviews or anything yet. And I think Bieniemy still wants to be a head coach. I don't know, man. I go back and forth. The biggest question to me is, like, would Bieniemy want this job unless there were no other jobs available? If I'm Eric, I would kind of think this is the last spot I want to land in. You got no line. You got to rebuild a line. You got a quarterback that's intriguing, but you know nothing about. And what looks like a lame duck coaching staff with an ownership change coming. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and some might look at that lame duck staff as like Eric can come here and step in and maybe be the next head coach. But as we saw with Wilkes in Carolina, as we see all the time, Bisaccia in Las Vegas, interim coaches or guys who step in for a fired coach rarely stick as the real guy. So that's probably not a great selling point in Washington's favor.
The other thing you can say for Washington is that the offense is pretty much
like 35. Sorry.
35?
35.
The offense is pretty much a blank canvas. There's no offensive identity. Like you said, you don't really know what the head coach – you don't really know what the quarterback is.
But, like, hold on. You say that, but the head coach and the football czar of operations says he wants a running identity. So, like, you can say that, but if Ron is saying that, then there is an identity. Now, maybe he doesn't mean it, but he sure as hell's saying it.
2 years ago, they didn't want to – 2 years ago, they didn't want a quarterback. They wanted to build up the team around and then drop the quarterback in. And then all of a sudden they go off the rails and trade, 2 third-rounders for Carson Wentz. Like, what is being said year by year by Ron changes. And it changes from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, and then changes from the end of the season to the beginning of training camp, and then changes again from training camp to the beginning of the season.
I agree with you, and I agree about the S-curve in all of its meanings. But, like, Ron said, we're just going to build up the team and then just try to drop a quarterback in. That was the Fitz year. Going into last offseason, Ron said quarterback's the number one priority. We got to do everything possible to fix it. Now, did they land on the wrong fix? Of course, in Wentz. But, like, that at least was consistent. Now, we'll see if this run game thing is consistent, but he did just say it. And the offseason hasn't started yet for it to be proved irrelevant.
Also worth mentioning, I don't think we recorded since Anthony Lynn will also potentially interview here. I think he he falls for me above the Shermers and the Zampesis, but still below the Bienemies and the Thomas Browns. He's a middling candidate in my view.
I like Len. I'd be quite intrigued by that. I think, I mean, you say it about Andy. I think anybody close to Kyle offense for a year gets my interest piqued.
Yeah.
But regardless, if Len and if Bieniemy interview, all of a sudden this pool of candidates has gotten much better.
Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I totally agree.
Does anybody care that Ron's playing golf this week? Not at the Senior Bowl, not apparently hiring any new offense coordinator.
For those not as attuned, Ron is playing in the Pebble Beach Pro-Am in California. While, the Commanders have no primary play caller and there's some staff like Jack Del Rio in Mobile. It's not the best look for a guy who seems almost always preoccupied with how he looks in his public image. But there have been inventions like telephones and the internet that allow him to sit in on interviews. And I think it's okay. I'm not going to get too fired up. I get angry at Ron for a lot of things, but playing golf in the beautiful West Coast weather with a bunch of other famous people is not one of them. And who knows, JP, as you said in your radio show, maybe he's hanging out with Aaron Rodgers in the clubhouse and showing him Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson highlights and doing a little in-person recruiting. Mitch, are you mad about this?
I got fired up last year when he missed the Senior Bowl because he was talking about how, all in he wanted everyone to be. This is just clearly Ron doesn't think it's that important to be at the Senior Bowl. You mentioned that Del Rio's there. Ryan Kerrigan's a coach on the defensive line over there. Jennifer King is coaching the running backs for the other side. So they have some folks that are around there. Clearly, you can tell that, there are portions of the pre-draft process that Ron thinks are very important and some that he thinks might be a little more superfluous. 2 years in a row missing the Senior Bowl lets you know kind of where Ron's head is for this particular portion of the offseason and the scouting of it. So I was fired up last year. I still think I think you still need to be turning over every rock you can and getting every opportunity you can to look at these prospects to figure out, who's what and where and when. But this is how Ron goes about it. So be it.
Well, just let's be clear. I think the entire front office staff is down there, save for Ron, beyond just the folks that are coaching, which is relevant. Now, there's some value in delegating, right? Like you have scouts, and they have like 100 senior personnel execs. Like, there's some value in them being able to get hands-on looks. The one thing that again, it's just more inconsistencies, right? Because Ron loves telling us at the combine that what he values the most are the interviews. You have an opportunity in Mobile to interview 125 players that are all seen as potential draft prospects. Every team gets to interview every player down there. So what's most important is the interviews. There's a whole bunch of them in Mobile going on. That's not to say that there aren't Commanders officials doing that, but Ron ain't one of them.
Yeah. But us three know better than anybody that the chance to play golf is very hard to turn down no matter what kind of work or other topics and issues arise. Playing golf is the best.
What about if Ron plays golf with Rodgers? Like, what if they're grouped up in a practice round? How silly does silly season get? Or what if Ron is paired up with Alex Smith? Is everybody waiting for a Patrick Reed, Rory tee throwing incident?
Yeah, Alex is going to be stepping in his line and not cleaning up the bunker behind him. It's going to be a brouhaha out there. I would love that. I'd care more about that than Aaron Rodgers, although it would be useful for Ron and Rodgers to gush about their days at Cal and maybe talk about how they could take down the NFC together.
I would love to see Alex Smith's pettiness come out with Ron and a little tee throw, a little step in the line, maybe not break a bunker.
Not giving him putts.
Yeah, no putts given.
I got to see it, Ron. Sorry,
Ron. That 2-footer's got a lot of break, man.
Ron, you didn't want to see me on the field. I got to see this putt.
Dude, I don't care that he's playing golf. Like, when OTAs come and inevitably some players miss it, it's their time. This is not – one thing that I think is important to point out, this is not like college football. Like, you're not recruiting right now. You know what I mean? Now, if they had an OC, I don't even think that person would be game planning yet because they don't know what the hell things are going to look like. So I'm not beating up a guy over playing golf. The Rodgers stuff. All the crazy rumors? We're all getting weird texts about Bezos and Tom Brady, like all the crazy stuff, all the headlines, all the stuff that would leave SportsCenter and land on like Stephen A's TV show. Lamar, Brady, Rodgers, any of it. 100 chips. How much of that do you see happening?
2 chips in terms of like the Bradys and the Rodgers. I'll put like 7 chips on Justin Fields coming to Washington.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. To me, Rex Ryan dropping the new owner happens in March. Bring in Sean Payton and Tom Brady was the most. None of it is realistic in any way, shape, or form, but was the most intriguing to me as far as a possible something that could be real. New owner comes in, wants to make a big splash. You go get Sean Payton and Tom Brady to come play in DC, and you're selling out FedEx Field for, every game that's there.
Right, but that's like intriguing too, like dating Margot Robbie and owning a Lamborghini and Carver being like a thoroughbred dog race winner. Like, it's intriguing, but it's never, ever going to happen. Sorry about you and Margot.
Correct. So I give it about 2 chips also, but
the Payton stuff I almost find more interesting than all the rest of it. Like, go back and find the Rossini tweet about, sources tell me that there is some mystery team out there if they ever get their ducks in a row. Like, there's no looser formation of ducks than the Washington Commanders. They are the loosest formation of ducks in the world.
Here's my question to you, JP. If we're talking about getting your ducks in a row and then they might be interested, who is floating that the Commanders might be interested in Sean Payton? Because it's not Ron Rivera. It's probably not Martin Mayhew or Marty Herney. That's probably
hold on. There's multiple things here. We don't even know that it's the Commanders, right? It's just the team that needs to get their ducks in a row.
If it is the Commanders who were the duckless team that Diana was talking about, that's most likely coming from ownership level,
or Peyton's agent that wants more money from Denver, or money from Fox to come back to TV. Who knows?
I'm saying if it comes from the team,
couldn't it be the Cowboys? Like, half of Dallas wants Payton back. Like, who the heck? That could come from a million places.
There's a million ifs to it. My point being that if it came from the team and the team that we cover, who have many ducks in many different places, the only person that would be making that sort of rumor from the Commanders team would be more than likely the current owner.
But even then, that owner is concerned with. He doesn't care.
Owners could be potential new ownership groups. The current owner is the owner of the loosest formation of ducks in NFL history.
Yeah,
it'd be the new person that plans on straightening the ducks.
Right. It'd be owner X. We need QBX and owner X.
I mean, they've needed QBX for so long, it's only appropriate they now need owner X.
Right.
I mean, owner X is by far more important than QBX, which is hard to say, but it is.
Yeah.
Was there something else, Pete, that you wanted to – the salary cap stuff?
Yeah, Daron Payne, franchise tag, salary cap. We can finish up there.
Cap went up to $224 million rather, from 208. That's a lot of money. The Commanders are already roughly $6 million under. You got to figure they cut Carson Wentz. That gets them $30 million under. They'll have some money to play with. A franchise tag for Daron Payne will cost you 19. A transition tag would cost you 16. I don't know, man. And people get very jumpy when I say this. Like, I'm not sure they're going to keep Payne. I think a transition tag might make more sense because you can at least work out a trade much easier without the barrier to entry being the franchise tag. They can afford Payne. but then they probably won't afford much else. There are a lot of cuts they could make that eventually we're going to get to. I think we do that maybe after the Super Bowl of like how you could rebuild this roster. But a lot of interesting numbers. I mean, they're going to have space. They have space, but they haven't really used all their space in the last few years. Dan's selling. We'll see if maybe this thing happens before March 15th, but it seems like an incredibly accelerated timeline. So I mean, we could do chips on Payne if you want, or just react to, increased cap space.
February 21st is the first date that teams can use the tags on players. So we got almost 3 weeks from today is the first day that teams can officially slap a tag on a player. But I think that D tackle number coming in for the franchise tag at 18.9, basically 19 million, pretty reasonable number there for one season, and the whatever it is 16.5 as a transition tag is certainly intriguing, because I would imagine they would get a fair amount of interest in a potential trade if they transitioned him.
Yeah, JP's probably talking to folks who've given him good insight, and which is maybe why he thinks they're not keeping him at all. I think franchise tag makes the most sense. I don't think I would do a long-term deal as good as he is, as young as he is. And, a lot of people say, well, they got to sign the other D lineman down the road. Well, the thing is about that, Payne just had 11.5 sacks. Montez Sweat is yet to fully break out. We don't know what Chase Young is. So I get let's just sign the player who's good right now and we'll figure out the others later. But I'm going to go against that. I just don't think it's how you build a winning team with 2 defensive tackles. Perhaps that's the next wave of the NFL, but it's not really how it's done right now. I think you can fill that with John Allen and then some draft picks and cheaper guys. I think that money's best served elsewhere. But keeping Payne here for one more year on the franchise tag is definitely reasonable and useful for Ron Rivera. And I think that by far is the most likely outcome. But that's just my slightly uninformed speculation.
The other side of this is how Daron reacts to being tagged. And I don't know, but I don't think he would react lovingly.
I think the problem with when you talk about a long-term deal potentially for Daron is you just signed John to a long-term deal that it was pretty fair between whether it's player-friendly or team-friendly. But if Daron steps in the next year is making more money than John, does that create any sort of, kind of friction or whatever? And you're right.
I don't think that would, honestly. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think I don't know, man. I think both guys would just kind of understand the market and how the cap went up. The next deal is going to be more. Maybe I'm wrong, but dude, they just drafted Finlay and Mathis. It doesn't add up. And who knows? That could be proven wrong, and we'll see in the next. 3 weeks, Mitch? You said February 21st.
February 21st is when it opens, and and they have to have the tag done by the March
6th, didn't you say, or something?
Yeah, something like that.
They did draft Mathis, but that was before Payne took 2 steps forward in terms of his stardom, and that was before Mathis shredded his knee. Both of those aspects of this situation have changed, but still, I just don't know if you can justify putting that much money into the middle of the D-line when I just disagreed with this idea, but when you have other guys to sign. And lastly, this is probably a small thing, but to go off of the relationships in the locker room and things, I still can't get out of my mind Daron Payne's locker being separated from the rest of the D-line. And I don't think all season I ever saw Daron mosey on over to talk to John Allen or Casey Tuhill or any of those guys. I don't know if Daron feels like a ton of loyalty to his teammates in a way that others would. I think he'd be content playing somewhere else instead of, feeling like he has to stick around with the guys he's gotten really close with. I don't know how close he is with them. And of course they got on a fight on TV once, which doesn't help that image.
I think, and understandably and probably correctly, I think Payne's biggest objective is a big ass multi-year contract. And so
I can't fault him for it.
Yeah. How much did John get guaranteed? 60? So Daron, and that was an extension with a year left on the deal.
Yeah.
So I think the guaranteed money for a Daron Payne deal, the 2 teams with the most cap space are the Bears and the Falcons. both of their GMs openly talked about the need for interior D-line pass rush. Like, now there's a lot of really good D linemen that could hit the market, but it's a great time for Payne to be possibly hitting the market. And if I was him and his people, think about locker cleanout. Did he have a heck of a lot to say?
Oh, less than usual.
Listen, the Commanders aren't the Eagles for a number of reasons, but you think about the game that the Commanders beat the Eagles in and what the Eagles' response to that was. They drafted Jordan Davis to be their kind of nose tackle, second interior guy. He got hurt. The Commanders ran all over him, beat him, and the Eagles went out and felt like they had to sign. They signed Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph, both trying to fill that gap of that quote unquote second D tackle. So we can talk about Fedarian Mathis potentially stepping in there. They didn't have a ton of help on the inside after. There wasn't a ton of success on the inside after Daron and John this year. So you do have to find somebody to plug that hole. And you need to. We've seen in DC, you need to find more than one person to plug that defensive tackle hole, because you can't have your 2 D tackles play 80-90% of the plays out there. So you can let them go, but you're creating another hole that you have to fill on this team.
Sure. No, I mean that I don't think anybody would dispute that. You're certainly creating a hole if you get rid of them. You got to think they kind of were trying to plan ahead for that when they spent a second rounder on Mathis last year.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, it certainly creates a hole, but dude. So the tag is at 19. Duran's going to want to get paid more than the tag. He's a Pro Bowl player. Say 20 mil for round numbers, and maybe it'll come in less than that. Who knows? But say it's 20 mil. He's going to want to get guaranteed for injury probably 4 or 5 years, and guaranteed outright 60, and guaranteed at signing, call it 35. And you're going to have to do it March 15th unless you use a tag.
Right.
Dan's cutting that check. All right. I think we have a really fun podcast coming for Thursday. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. I'm excited for that. Mitch, what was up with your parents at the Terps game?
Oh, it was cool. So the Terps game on Saturday, my parents were honored as the alumni donors of the game. They've been Terrapin Club members for almost 50 years. Cool. They started in the year they graduated from Maryland in 1974, so 48 years or so. And they were invited down to the court. They got to sit there for the first till the first TV timeout and got recognized on the big screen. They sent Maryland a bunch of pictures, including one of me from when I was in, I guess, just out of college, when I had a pretty big kind of fro-y hair type situation that folks were having a good time with. But it was, it was one of those proud son moments. It was cool to see, their alma mater recognize them, and it was a cool moment.
Yep,
I love it.
agree.
Congrats to the Tischlers. We'll be back on Thursday with a fun podcast. We good, boys?
We are great, JP. So glad to have you back.
Happy you made it back in one piece, and you'll have to tell us when I hit stop record now how much that cowboy hat was.
You made it this far. I owe you a beer.